The iMore Show is brought to you by Betterment, the automated investment service built on the idea that investing intelligently should be intuitive, it should be automated and accessible to everyone, whether you have $10,000 or $10 million. Over 36,000 customers are already using Betterment's user-friendly web and smartphone applications to improve their returns, save time and money, and minimize their taxes. For a limited time, listeners of this show can get up to 6 months of free automated investment management by visiting betterment.com/imore. That's betterment.com/imore. Okay, it is July 31, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about new MacBook Pro bumps. We're going to talk about the best apps for so many things, and we're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. You know why? Because this is the iMore Show. Joining me, as always, we have the managing editor of iMore and the chief kaiju in charge, Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
I am good. How are you, Renee?
I'm doing. You're looking fabulous today, Peter, if I might say.
Oh, thank you very much.
And also joining us.
And you're looking very birthday yourself, Renee.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm getting older and 1 year closer to death. Actually last year on my birthday, my godkids came up to me, and they were 3 and 7 at the time, and they said, "We don't want you to have more birthdays because it means you're closer to dead."
Wow, that's
wow.
Somebody's got to stop reading them Nietzsche before their bedtime or something. That's awful.
From the mouths of babes. That voice you heard also joining us is the how-to editor and cheap app whiz at iMore, Ali Kazmu. How are you, Ali?
I am fantastic.
Looks like you're getting a lot of sun in the Midwest. Is that normal?
For about 2 more months. Just take advantage of it as long as I can, and then it turns into Canada for a couple months.
Are you at your fancy new standing desk?
I am.
I am too. I love this standing thing. It feels like I'm not falling down.
Yeah, I'm liking it so far. I'm only up to I'm standing probably about half the day.
That's better than none.
Yeah. So.
All right, so Ali unfortunately can't join us for the whole show, so we're going to front load a lot of what she's here to talk about. But we're going to try and get Ali on more often because she writes about all these fantastic apps every week. And instead of me and Peter looking at each other going, I don't know. I don't know. We're going to get Ali to talk about them a little bit. So Ali, one of the things you wrote about recently was the best invoicing apps for iPhone and how to get paperless.
Yeah. So the collection of apps that we did for best invoicing apps, I really looked at freelancers and small businesses for that, mainly because of the fact that those are the people that benefit the most from those apps. They may not need to necessarily pay for a subscription fee or, pay a company to do invoicing for them. So there's a lot of options, and no one really wants to sit at their desk at the end of the day to, punch out a bunch of invoices. So we looked at a bunch of apps that basically focus on small business and help them figure out how to invoice the most efficiently. Some of those are also time trackers, which kind of lets it double up on usefulness.
So what were your favorites?
I really there's a new one, I reviewed it recently, 2 Hours. That's a time tracker and an invoicing app in one. Technically, it's more of a time tracker than it is an invoicing app, but it does invoice. So for people that maybe don't have, 100 clients, but only have a few clients that they work with closely, or they have to track time in order to be billed, that would probably be my pick, just because it's very easy to use. It works as a series of timers. So basically, if you forget to stop something, it'll pester you every once in a while to say, hey, did you mean to leave this timer running? Do you need to start a timer because you haven't? So it makes it a little harder to forget to track your time.
And that's Jeremy Olson and his company Tapity, and he was actually on Iterate last week talking about it. And it took him a couple of years to get that done, but I think he got it done really well.
Yeah, I would agree. Just the way the color coding is done and the way that the app is laid out, it makes it really easy for you to see where you're spending your time at. It can also help anyone who's self-employed maybe use their time a little bit better and become a little bit more efficient with time management, because you can see how your days are plotted out, and if you have maybe a bulk of the day every day that you're not spending time on something, you can kind of figure out where you can take new projects on and where you can't.
So am I going to get all my invoices from you in this app now, Ali?
Maybe.
Peter, you took a look at the best Mac apps for July. How did July do for the Mac App Store?
July was kind of a lean month for the Mac App Store, to be honest with you. The summer months are often sort of the doldrums time for Mac developers and for Apple in general. It seems when it comes to the Mac, although we've seen a little bit of movement. But having said that, there were still some very exciting apps out there that are definitely worth checking out. If you do any kind of web design, for example, or if you do any kind of user experience or user interface work in application design, you need to check out Xscope. You can go to xscopeapp.com. That's XCO or XSCOPEAPP.com. And check out this new app from the Icon Factory. It's a new version of an app that's been around for a while, but it is an incredibly detailed tool for taking a look at images on your screen and understanding exactly how they relate to each other. So if you're a web designer doing responsive web design, for example, and you want to make sure all the page elements that you're working with are working well together, or if you need to see very detailed character information for typography that you're working with, Xscope can help you. It's a fantastic app. It puts up it helps you do pixel-specific placement. It helps you do very precise measurements in pixels and other units. It's very cool stuff. Also,
I love that app. So before you go on, I use that app all the time, especially when I was a web developer. I used it constantly. I still have it running all the time. Gideon Mejia and Craig. I'm blanking. Hockenberry. Yeah, Hockenberry. Fantastic job.
A fellow kaiju, by the way.
Yeah, he's like 9 feet tall. They did a fantastic job. They knocked this one out of the park.
Yes, for sure. Another app that I really loved that came out well, technically it didn't come out this month. It came out in late June, but forgive me. We haven't really looked at it too closely, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to showcase it, was LaunchBar. Now, if you're excited about what's coming in OS X Yosemite, with the revised Spotlight that sort of does everything, your one-stop shop for accessing all kinds of neat data, LaunchBar will fill that gap. In fact, it works the same way. It pops up a search field in the center of your screen, just like Spotlight on Yosemite does. But it goes much, much further than that. You can drill down and get really detailed information about the documents or the files that you're trying to access. You can do nice transformations with them, like you can open them in different apps. You can send them. You can embed them in different documents and so on. It is an incredibly useful productivity tool that's definitely worth checking out. You can download.
Can I ask you about that, Peter? Because I use Spotlight, okay, and I know I lose massive nerd points by just using Spotlight. Seth Clifford, Dieter Bohlen have told me I have to use Alfred. Some people tell me I have to use this app. Some people tell me I have to use Quicksilver. Do you have any advice on that?
It's like shoes, right? Or even gloves, for that matter, or buying a new mouse. Everyone's taste in these things is different based on how they work, based on how they're comfortable for working. I really get a kick out of LaunchBar. I like the way that it works. It's very simple. It's very intuitive for me. It's got a lot of features that I can use when I want to, and other stuff that I just never touch, but the features are there, and it can do all sorts of really cool stuff. LaunchBar 6 specifically was a completely redesigned user interface, so if you've tried LaunchBar before and you've not liked it, now might be a good time. But my recommendation with all these things is to download them all and find out which one, if any of them, really suit your workflow. You may find that Spotlight is perfectly acceptable, or that you don't need an additional productivity tool to help you get access to stuff because you're really comfortable working the way that you are. But if you are, the nice thing is that apps like LaunchBar exist, so you can tweak your user interface a little bit and really be as productive as you can on your Mac.
Allie, do you use any of these?
I don't. I'm kind of really OCD about my Macs, like being organized, so I pretty much am pathetic and know where everything is. So the only time I use Spotlight just because it's quick and if I'm trying to get to an application fast. But since I pretty much know where my stuff is, I don't really.
See, I have no idea. I don't use Spotlight. This is interesting, Peter. See, I use Command Space just to launch apps, but I don't like the way that Spotlight in Mavericks on down actually finds files for me. So then I use Finder and I use the search window in Finder because that to me makes more sense. But when I'm on Yosemite now, it works so much better that I think I'm going to swap from using the search field in Finder to using Yosemite Spotlight.
I think that a lot of people. Sorry, Allie?
I'm the opposite. I don't like Spotlight. I think the thing that irks me with Spotlight in Yosemite is that it's smack in the middle of the screen.
I love that.
See, I don't, because sometimes I need to see, like I use the calculator feature of Spotlight all the time, and when it's smack in the middle of the screen, I can't see the numbers I'm trying to add, or, I just feel like sometimes it's in the way.
That's fair. Like I said, it's and change is hard. Going from one user interface to another can be hard. And as far as Launchboard's concerned, some people are going to like it, some people are going to hate it. But I think it's worth checking out because it's a free download anyway. You don't have to pay anything to take a look at it. You can download it straight from the website, and if you like it, it's $29.
And I think Syracusa likes it, which is as good a recommendation as any.
There you go.
I think I interrupted you, Peter. Was there one more on your list?
There were a couple. Capo 3.1, significant update if you are a fan of super, ultra, mega groovies, musician's tool for slowing down songs. Yeah, seriously, without changing the pitch of the song so you can slow them down and hear them. It can automatically extract chords now. And it also has iCloud Sync, so if you've got Capo Touch for your iPad, you have a continuous workflow from iOS to the Mac. And then there's Flowboard, which is a really cool alternative to things like PowerPoint or Keynote, for that matter, that help you build interactive presentations that you can send to anyone. Presentations can contain text, they can contain video, they can contain audio. It's a real reimagining of the way that presentations work, done in a very intuitive way for people who are accustomed to, sort of clicking and experiencing whatever it is that they're working with, and it's a really neat application.
We have, I counted Flowboard as one of my favorite presentation apps for iOS a while back. So I think the Mac version of Flowboard, doesn't that sync with iOS too? Because it's been out for iOS for a while.
It sure does, and yes, it has. I forgot to mention that, Allie. Flowboard, if you're already familiar with Flowboard from iOS, this is Flowboard, but with a Mac experience. And, they haven't just ported the iOS version to the Mac. They've actually added some really cool features. You get some stuff like shape creation tools, a full color wheel with opacity control as well, rich text support, very important for Mac users who want to be able to do typographical stuff, support for Vimeo.
PDFs.
Sorry?
You can include PDF documents.
PDF documents, yes.
I don't think any other presentation software includes.
And, of course, a full support for Mac keyboard shortcuts, so you can keep your fingers on the keyboard where they belong instead of clicking on things.
So our friend Simon Sage did the iOS version of this best iPhone and iPad apps for July, and I'll just throw some of them out there to get your opinion on it. Right at the top, he has Modern Combat 5 Blackout, and you talked about that last week, Peter. It is what Gameloft does best.
It really is. I love them or lump them. Gameloft is a very talented game developer, and they don't have an original idea in their heads, but they are better at cloning games than just about anybody out there for the Mac space, I think. I mean, for the iOS space. They're
doing licensed properties, too. Like, they'll get an Iron Man game out, when the movie comes out and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah, no, and they're very good at what they do, so, it's always worth checking their stuff out, I think.
There was always Fates. There was also Fates Forever, Magic 2015, Civilization Revolution 2. If your first Revolution didn't stick.
Right, exactly.
The Wolf Among Us.
Now, The Wolf Among Us, I have to take a moment to talk about because it is such a cool game. First of all, Telltale Games is a really cool game developer. They make graphical adventure games. designed for just about every platform imaginable. You can download them on the Mac. You can download them on PC. You can get them through Steam. You can't get them through the Mac App Store. You can download them directly from Telltale Games' website. The App Store, of course, for iOS, Android, everything gets these games these days. But they do these really, really cool games that are part choose-your-own adventure and part like kind of button masher sort of games. But they're beautifully detailed. They're very well acted. And they are a continuation. If you played games, adventure games, whether you go back to the old text-based games of like, Zork, like Infocom games, and even King's Quest, the Sierra Online stuff that was really popular in the 80s and 90s. This is sort of the ultimate example of what that genre has turned into in a way. They're really beautiful games. The Wolf Among Us, in particular, is really neat. It's actually based off of I don't think it's a too well-known graphic novel series called Fables, if I remember correctly. And the idea basically is that
that's Bill Willingham's series, right?
That is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love Bill Willingham. He's awesome.
You love everything that's graphic novel and comic book related.
You take that. He did Elementals, Peter. Okay, that was seminal.
Yeah, no, this is true. So the idea is that you're Big B Wolf. You're actually the big bad wolf in human form. And I'm not going to get into all of them, but The Wolf Among Us is in many ways even better than The Walking Dead, which they have done as a series of games as well. One of the things that makes Telltale Games kind of cool is that they release their stuff episodically. So if you want, you can pay up front and just download the new episodes as they come out. But The Wolf Among Us recently wrapped its current season, so you've got a complete game to play now. Just very cool stuff. Check it out. Telltale Games, neat stuff.
Now I'm going to check it out just because of Bill Willingham. See all that difference that makes to me, Peter?
There you go.
So, Ali, for the app side, we have NPR One and Overcast, which both want to sort of change the way that we listen to stuff.
I have only had a chance to briefly look at Overcast. I haven't really had a chance to really listen to many podcasts lately.
I don't think you do, though. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
Occasionally I do, but not on a regular, ongoing basis, no.
So I was on the beta for Overcast. So I've been using it for a long time, and I really like it. It is limited. There's no video, for example, and I don't think he's going to support video. It's iPhone only right now, though there is a web client, which is really good. We had Marco on Debug this week. You can listen to Guy English and myself talk to him for 3 hours, and you can do it in Overcast if you want to. Podcasts are. Remember, Ali, we went through phases like everybody made a Twitter app, and then everybody made a weather app, and now everybody's making a podcast app.
Yeah.
It's like the I think Gruber calls it the design playground, and I think it's true. But if you're interested in the way that Marco listens to podcasts, it's good to check. The one thing, because I'm in Canada, I haven't had a chance to play with was NPR One. I don't know if you've tried it, but I wonder. I know you use a lot of streaming services, and does the idea of streaming talk radio appeal to you as much as music?
No, I don't really listen to any kind of talk radio, so I don't think that would have had an appeal. I haven't looked at that.
Have you checked to look at it at all, Peter?
Not at all.
I
am with Ali. I am not a talk radio person.
This is like one of those Nielsen surveys where everyone checks off they watch PBS, but we're all really watching TMZ.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of NPR, but that doesn't count as talk radio, does it?
Oh, I don't know. What is NPR? See, I'm Canadian. I might not know what the hell I'm talking about. Is this like CBC radio?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with this app, at least, you can take all their audio programming and podcasts, and there's curated selections, and it looks like you can choose your own adventure when it comes to your NPR listening. So if you have listened to it, tell us what you think. Because I'm interested to know. Because this is, Apple just bought. I forget the name now, but Apple just bought a streaming.
Sway or something like that.
Swell. Yeah, so Apple bought Swell, which does, and this is hard for me because I woke up in the morning and I heard that Apple bought, streaming. They bought the Pandora of X, and to me, because I don't have Pandora, I just thought they meant they had streaming stuff. Oh, Apple's got streaming books and streaming talk radio now, but what they really meant was the recommendation engines. That Pandora apparently, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, is really good at figuring out what kind of music to put together.
Mm-hmm. Pandora does a pretty decent job of that. Pandora has a much smaller library by far than streaming services like Spotify and RDO. Those typically are in the 20 million range. I think Pandora, I'm pretty sure they only have a library of less than like a million songs. I know it's under 2 million, but they're really, really good at curation. So, and I think the only company that probably comes close to that is Beats. They're really, really good at curation, and it didn't take as long for it to kind of figure out your likes and tastes.
I guess, and Peter, this might be the problem now, is that there is so much content available that we just don't know what to listen to. And the theory behind this is it could recommend better books, almost I guess like Netflix does with their recommended. And they famously had a contest, I think, where you could win $1 million by helping them make a better recommendation engine. That being able to help people find what to listen to next is becoming more important.
Well, I think that I think that content stretches across multiple media forms. It's not just music. It's understanding what to watch on television. It's understanding what apps to download for your iOS devices. And this is why curation is something that we hear about over and over again, and why folks like us try to do roundups of what we think are the best apps, because there is it's like drinking from a fire hose constantly. You're constantly barraged with new content all the time. How do you make sense of it?
I don't, Peter. I mean, I read iMore. I try. Allie tells me what to get.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, especially, Apple or whoever can make 80 billion app collections, but, it's like drinking from a fire hose, and, I experience that sometimes with best apps. Those collections take a while to put together because there's so much. And same thing goes for audio. It's, what streaming service do you buy? They're pretty much level-footed now. I mean, you can, basically you're drilling down to little technical things like audio quality. Spotify might have different exclusive deals with certain artists like Metallica or whatever. So, and it's coming down to where they're fighting over those little nitty-gritty details to sway users. So it's becoming more of a what do I choose type scenario.
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer to that. I know some people. I don't even use playlists. I mean, I generally declare bankruptcy in everything all the time. So I go to Twitter. There's 1,000 messages. I read down from the top until I get as far as I can go. Then I give up. When I come to my email, I have 1,000 messages waiting. I read down as far as I can go, and I give up. When I have new podcasts downloaded or new stuff waiting, I go as far as I go, and then I mark everything as read. I know that's horrible. I know I'm abdicating my humanity in a way by doing that, but it just feels like there's too much of everything all the time.
There's no question, Renee, that we are inundated constantly, and I think that as developers come up with more clever expert systems for managing this, it's an important thing. And I mean that was one of the reasons why Apple acquired Beats Music, right? Because they said right up front that they thought that Beats did curation better than anyone. And I mean, okay, iTunes is absent of so much functionality that we kind of, and iTunes Radio is absent of so much functionality that we demand and sort of expect out of our streaming services. But Beats Music is a very different experience, and that's because there are humans that are actually putting together the playlists and figuring out what you should listen to. So I think that element cannot be underrated.
Allie, I know you've been going back and forth with your war with curated services. What are you using now?
I have all of them.
You gave up and got all of them?
Mainly for iMore purposes, just so I can actually evaluate and know what each one is offering. But I guess if I think about which ones I'm using the most these days, right now I'm kind of on a Spotify kick. I don't really know why. Just since our app got overhauled, I think I was kind of messing with that and, getting a good perspective on that. And I get stuck where I'll, start making small playlists or favoriting things in one app, and then I stick to that for a while. And then when I'm tired of that, I'll switch to a different service. But if I just want to listen to something and just be able to hit play and not have to look for anything, I typically open Beats or Pandora.
All right, so moving us along, we have a new series of columns. We've been doing a lot for accessibility and inclusivity lately, and you can go to imore.com/accessibility if you want to see all of it. And a couple things struck me here. One was we did a debug a while ago on the Swift language, and we had Natalia Berdis join us. She makes Kudu Kitchen, which is a great app for cooking with kids, and she did a talk at WWDC about helping people with autism and designing for accessibility. But the word she uses is inclusivity, because for her it goes beyond people with visual impairments or audio impairments or physical impairments, and really, making it more accessible for anyone, whether it's kids or grandparents getting their first computer ever, or basically anyone who needs help getting into computers. And we decided to start a series of columns because, and Ali and I and Peter have talked about this before. Even when something is silly, not silly, but it's something like best apps, we don't know everything. Like best apps for pilots, I don't know. Best apps for elevator mechanics, I have no idea. So there's going to be times where we have to go beyond ourselves. And I've written quite a bit about accessibility. Peter's spoken about it with the Mac. Ali's talked about it in context of apps before, but we wanted to get people who that was their expertise. So we have the first one up already, and that's by Stephen Aquinos, really well-known iOS accessibility writer. And he wrote about something I hadn't even considered, and that's hardware. And he called it the often overlooked aspect of accessibility and how big a difference it can mean for him. And he has some motor function challenges just going from an iPad 4 to an iPad Air because it was so much lighter, and he wanted the bigger screen, but it was a struggle for him to use it. He could never use it for very long, and the iPad Air is just light enough now that he can use it for long periods of time, and that was pretty much transformative for him. And we're going to keep doing these series. We're going to have several different contributors. Steven's going to keep contributing. We'll have a few other guests, but I'm really happy that we're doing this because we've spoken about this before. Apple does a lot of the heavy lifting for free. Like if you just use UIKit, you get the audio stuff, the motor stuff. That's those stuff's all pretty much just works. The visual stuff, the speak selection and voiceover, that works if you use UIKit. But if you make a custom interface, it goes away. And often developers do that because they want their apps to stand out, but then they don't have the resources or time to go back and re-add accessibility. But it makes such a big difference to so many lives. And I don't know how you feel, Ali, but I'm starting to check every app now that we look at as sort of just like a basic layer of accessibility.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I have a lot of friends that are teachers, and some of them have dealt with disabled or taught special education, and they use iPads a lot. And I think it's interesting sometimes to hear about the different experiences and the different apps that they use. And I kind of have been doing the same thing just because right now I've kind of been focusing on, tips and how-tos and how to better use accessibility features, and I kind of catch myself doing that, like seeing what apps support what and, how it differs when you get into App Store experiences and different apps that are third-party. Where does that end,
Yeah, the couple of complaints we have gotten is more on the Mac side here. That surprised me because you always hear about the Mac being really good for this, but people seem to think that it's not doing as good a job for the speak selection and voiceover stuff. Like they would like it to talk to them even more.
Well, there's certainly some something for Apple to listen to there then.
Well, I think the biggest but the biggest omission from the Mac right now is still Siri, because going back to that WWDC commercial where they had the blind woman basically using her phone just by using Siri, and the Mac can talk to you, can do all that stuff, but we still don't have that that sort of discussability. We don't have that contextually aware sequential inference engine on the Mac, and I think that would make a big difference to people.
Yeah, and people, I think, have seen Siri ever since its introduction as something that would be a very natural progression on the Mac. So they're getting frustrated with Apple and not understanding why it's not happening faster.
Move faster, Apple, please. We want Siri everywhere.
Seriously, Apple, come on.
We ran a poll. We're trying to be good about our weekly polls again. So last week we asked you how much you use the iPad, whether you use it as much as Tim Cook did. This week we're asking about screen size, because the screen size of the iPhone 6 is really interesting. There's rumors that there's a 4.7 and a 5.5 inch iPhone. There's been part leaks for the 4.7 but not the 5.5, and you generally think there'd be equal part leaks for both if both were coming and soon. There haven't been part leaks for a new 4-inch iPhone, but maybe they're going to keep the existing iPhone 5S design or internals, or bump up the iPhone 5C and keep a 4-inch device. So we asked the iMore readers, who are all incredibly good looking and incredibly smart, what they wanted, and the results were really, really interesting. So 29.79% want a 5.5-inch iPhone. If you're going to go big, go big. 4.7 inches is wanted by 55.32% of iMore readers, by far the majority. It's big, but it's still a phone. 12.98, so 13% of people want a 4-inch phone, don't change a thing, and 1.91, almost a whopping 2%, want Apple to go back to the 3.5-inch phone. Does that surprise you, Ali?
No.
Where do you fall on this line? I don't know if we've asked you this
4.7.
before. 4.7, happy medium, Motorola Moto X size?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my phone now, and I don't remember how big the S5 is, but this is too big for me. I hit things on accident when I try to, I feel like this is too big. It's oversteps its bounds a little bit. So I don't think that I would be comfortable using a phone even this size on a regular basis. I would probably buy another 4-inch phone before I would buy a phone this size.
When I see I think it's 5 or 5.1, the Galaxy S4, Peter, whenever I see an iPhone next to it, it looks to me like a Tauntaun ready to be hollowed out as a case.
I know, seriously. Or, like some futuristic surfboard, that you step on and magic things happen, kind of like Alex in Back to the Future, or whatever his name was in Back to the Future, Marty.
Yeah, Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah, Alex P. Keaton from Back to the Future 2, right?
Like Opie Cunningham.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would like a larger phone as well. I'll leave it to you guys because you guys live in this stuff a lot more than I do to try to figure out what the right size is. But the bottom line is the current form factor of the iPhone is too small for me. Maybe it's just because I have fat pudgy kaiju fingers, but I like to be able. I find the ability to navigate the iPad, the full-sized iPad, the iPad Mini, a lot easier than I do the iPhone, and I find myself stumbling a lot. And where it annoys me the most, or where it slows me down the most, is doing things like texting. Which I feel like I should be able to do a lot faster than I can, and it's just because I just can't hit the screen, the areas on the screen that I need to with the amount of exactitude that I want to be able to do. And I know that a larger screen is going to give me a little bit more wiggle room there. So I would really like to.
Is it easier for you on the iPad?
It's certainly it's a completely different user experience on the iPad, because on the iPhone, I can go dual thumb, but on the iPad it's hunt and peck.
I use 2 thumbs. I split the keyboard on my iPad.
Okay.
And I type that way with 2 thumbs, but I cannot type either way. Even if I have my iPad laying flat with the full keyboard, I cannot type as fast on my iPad as I can on my phone.
Interesting.
How do you type on your phone, Ali?
2 thumbs.
Okay. See, on my iPhone, I usually use 1 thumb. Like I just sort of hold it in one hand.
Sometimes I do that.
Video and I just start tapping away like that. I very rarely use 2 thumbs, but I've seen Jessie Char, who's now at Pacific Helm, but she was at Apple, and I think she won fastest typer at Apple, and she used 2 thumbs with the keyboard clicks on because she said the keyboard clicks made her type faster.
The other one who's an absolute 2-thumb Jedi is Mark Gurman at 9to5Mac. I've seen that guy just tear off immense passages of text on his phone. It freaks me out.
I saw Brian Lamb do the same thing. It was scary.
Kids today. Brian's not much of a kid.
No, but on the iPad, I don't split the keyboard, but I turn it portrait mode, and the iPad Air, and especially the iPad Mini, are so thin now that in portrait, I can just thumb type like I could on a large phone, I think.
I will say this much, and this is my biggest peeve with the iPad, and I know it's not an Apple thing, it's a developer thing. The Facebook app is a prime example. If you use split keyboard, developers for some reason do not think about that, and sometimes that covers the keyboard, if that makes sense, or like what you're typing, you can't see it. Slack does it, the app we use. I can't stand that when you split the keyboard and all of a sudden you can't see the text input field because it's covered. I don't know if that's a iOS issue or if it's a developer issue. I'm thinking it's a developer issue, but that is incredibly irritating.
When you said Facebook and incredibly irritating, I thought you were going to mention the fact that they're forcing all of us out of Facebook.app and into Messenger.app to send IMs.
Yeah, I kind of see a pattern with that style happening. It just happened with Foursquare and Swarm, which I still don't necessarily understand I don't know.
And Instagram and Bolt. I mean, we have to have a separate picture messaging app for Instagram too, like Facebook and Slingshot.
Yeah. I prefer the all-in-one bundle method. but I don't know. There has to be some incentive or so. I don't know. I don't understand
Slingshot
that.
was, I like the way John Gruber classified it. He said Slingshot is one of the apps that is built in and undeletable on the phone you get given in hell.
Yeah.
Because the whole premise of it was, like, if Allie sent me a message, I couldn't see her message until I sent her one back, which was
Yes.
supposed to promote engagement, but it promoted rage, because I'm supposed to answer Allie before I've seen what she says, which means all I can do is send her nonsense, and then she can't see my reply. Then I can reply to her, but she's got the nonsense to deal with first, and she can't see it, so she has to send nonsense back. It is almost like just holding me down and punching me in the head
Well, and
repeatedly.
what's going to happen there is people are going to do this, and they're just going to cover the camera and snap a photo, and that's how many blank pictures are probably sent over Slingshot. I would say, for me personally, my opinion, if there was an award for the most useless, pointless, dumb app of the year, it would go to Slingshot.
I think it's fighting Yo, and now it's fighting Bolt for that title.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into too much about what Bolt is, but
It's Instagram Instant, basically, which they already had direct messages built in, but now it's just there's basically their Snapchat clone.
oh, okay.
And Peter, I don't think you use Instagram. Like, I see Allie's dog pictures almost all the time, but I haven't seen anything from you in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Instagram and Pinterest are just two visually oriented social networks that I just have never caught into for some reason. I have no idea why, but I've just never gotten. They've never hooked themselves into my brain. What is wrong with me?
Because it has to be something wrong with you, Peter. It can't be something wrong with them.
Exactly. No, it's got to be. I mean, all the cool kids are doing it. Why not me?
So speaking of cameras, Allie and I knocked out, mostly Allie, I just helped a little bit, the ultimate camera guide for the iPhone. And I'm really psyched about this because I know Apple said that Messages is the most used app on iOS, but you got to think the camera is not far behind. Mm-hmm. And people take so many pictures, and Leanna a couple of years ago did a photography guide for us, but that was more, the rule of thirds and negative space and shadow and light and all these concepts for making your photos better. But what I like about this, Ali, is that you actually took the time to show people how to use everything that's built into that app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing sometimes how many questions I've gotten, whether it's friends or family or whoever. I think people that are tech savvy, they take the time to poke around those apps and figure out what they can do with them. But most of the mainstream public, they're just going to launch it and hit the shutter button. They don't really, or they don't understand what HDR is or what autofocus and auto exposure are, or how they can make photos better by taking them better. So, I mean, and Apple doesn't give us a tremendous amount of tools, which will probably change in the future with iOS 8 and beyond, but they give you enough tools that, you can produce some pretty good images if you know what you're doing with the camera app.
I think that's absolutely true. And again, some people think this is too easy, but I had a family friend who worked as a computer engineer for many years, and he said, it's so frustrating. I have to sync all my photos off my iPhone before I can share them with anybody. And I just tapped the share button and showed him all the options, email, messages. And he's like, I never even saw that. And again, this is a computer engineer, so you can only imagine how many people aren't using this stuff to its full capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy about that. I'm also, actually, I don't know how I feel about this, Peter, but Apple press released those Haswell bumps that you've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So beginning of last week, Intel released updated Haswell chips, and Apple wasted no time getting them into production. In fact, Apple already had them at the point where Intel was announcing that they were available. The updates are pretty mild. Basically, the Retina MacBook Pros get a 200 megahertz bump, but Apple's also dropped the price of the high-end 15-inch by $100, and it's doubled the RAM on the entry-level models. So you're now getting 8 gigs of RAM instead of 4 on the 13, and you're getting 16 gigs of RAM across the board on the 15s. So this makes it a little bit easier to bear if you were thinking about getting a Retina MacBook Pro. The other thing that they did that's probably worthy of note is that they dropped $100 off of the price of the standard 13-inch MacBook, that venerable machine, which is now 2 years old. So if you still want a conventional hard drive, 500 gigabyte hard drive, 4 gigs of RAM, you're now only paying $10.99 instead of $11.99. So there was some nice reordering in MacBook land, or MacBook Pro land this month, and this pretty much aligns the MacBook Pro with what Apple did in April when it refreshed the MacBook Air and dropped its price as well. It refreshed that with a 100 megahertz processor update. These updates aren't going to generate huge performance improvements compared to what you could get last week or last month. And they're not going to provide huge additional power savings or anything. This is a very mild, modest bump. I think the price realignment and the RAM realignment were probably the more noteworthy things to take away from this. It tells me that Apple is probably a ways away from adopting Broadwell, the next generation of Intel microprocessor, on any kind of widespread level.
Probably because Intel is still miles away from shipping the damn thing.
Well, that's the problem. Intel is holding up production until it's got all of its issues worked out, and Intel is months behind schedule on that. So, yeah, it isn't a great season if you're expecting amazing new things out of Apple on the Macintosh line. It doesn't look like.
Yeah, so I know that you have imore.com/Mac-buyers-guide where you go through all this, Peter, but if someone was looking for a MacBook Pro last week and waited, it sounds like they'll get more for their money. Like, it won't be a big speed boost, but they'll get more RAM or they'll get a slightly lower price. Does this change your buying advice at all? Are there any particular models that you think people should be more interested in?
Well, if I were buying a new machine today, I would look very closely at the 13-inch MacBook Pro with Retina display. I think that it's a great value. I think that the default RAM configuration makes it a better value than it was before. It's a very usable machine. The only thing that I might tweak would be the storage capacity on it, because the SSDs, Apple's still very parsimonious when it comes to actual onboard storage for these things. Having said that, it really depends on what your needs are specifically. I know that the MD101, the standard 13-inch MacBook Pro, continues to be really popular, especially with families who are buying them for school kids, whether they're in K through 12 or whether they're in college, because it's a lot of space, it's a decent machine, they're great for doing research and homework and other assignments. They've got internal super drives, and they're the only Macintosh, the only Mac, not just the only MacBook, but the only Mac left with an internal super drive. And some people really like that because maybe they want to watch DVD movies that they borrow from the library or rent from Redbox. Or maybe they want to listen to music that's still on audio that they haven't gotten around to still on audio CD that they haven't gotten around to ripping yet. There are a lot of different reasons why people like these, or just for doing backups and archivals and being able to easily give somebody a disk that you've burned that contains content on it. A lot of different reasons.
Burning their mixtape for their sweetie.
Yeah, exactly. I personally have a MacBook Pro 15-inch Retina display that I absolutely love, but it's an edge case. The people who need those are not everyone else. They're content creators, they're people who are doing video editing on their machines, or in my cases I use it for my primary game system when I'm testing out new games. That's not everybody, and it's an expensive machine. It starts at $2,000. So I think that the MacBook Pro 13-inch, the MacBook Pro Retina display is probably where I would focus the bulk of my attention for a lot of people right now.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break, and I am going to tell you about one of our fantastic sponsors for today, and as soon as I get it loaded up. Man, this is embarrassing. Here we go. And that is 1 month. So 1 month specifically, 1 month HTML is a course that will teach you how to make a website. I learned by buying a book and reading that book and looking at other websites, and it was a painful process. And yes, I managed to eventually get a website up, but it took me a long time, and I missed a lot of things along the way. So what 1 month HTML is for anyone who wants to make a website, anyone who wants to get started. It's the easiest way to learn to code. It's 30 minutes a day for 30 days. You'll build an actual website starting from day one, and you'll be welcomed into a community of 12,000 other students, all learning online. You'll launch 3 projects, including an online portfolio, a blog template, and a landing page. And the best part is, if you get stuck, there's always someone to help you out while you learn. A real, actual human being type person. So what I want you to do is to go to www.onemonth.com/The iMore Show. And again, it's 1 month HTML, 30 minutes a day for 30 days, and you'll be able to code HTML and CSS on your own. Looks great on your resume if you're going for that promotion, if you're going for that new job, even if you just want to build a website, for your family, for your sports team, for your hobby, for anything. Enrollment is typically $99, but if you join now, you'll get a one-time discount, 25% off for joining. And as always, you'll be helping to support the iMore Show. So I want to thank 1 month, and I want to thank you guys. All right, so Peter, there is once again a bit of a brouhaha in the App Store and about the value of the Apple ecosystem, and it touched off. It goes off occasionally, but this time it was because of Jared Sinclair's post about his RSS reader unread and how, after spending almost a year building it, it didn't make that much money. And I know Mac apps are priced typically a lot higher than iOS apps, and they've been more resilient when it comes to races to the bottom, but also it's a much smaller market. So I think if we look on average, it's still a challenge. Gus Mueller has written about this, Brent Simmons has written about this, a lot of really intelligent people. You and I have talked about this, and I don't think there's any easy solutions. I still think that this is a trinary problem. I think Apple doesn't do enough to, and I don't know if they really can, but I think it would behoove them to take action to try to increase the value of their platform, because I still have those nightmares of ET cartridges being buried in the desert, which is what happens when a platform loses all value. Marco Arment thinks, for example, they should get rid of top lists. That top lists cater to exactly the wrong sort of metrics. But there's also developers who did race to the bottom, and there's also us as consumers who just said we're not going to pay, $1, $5, $10, whatever, for quality apps. And it's a problem that is complex, and I don't know if there's any easy answers.
Yeah, in Unread's case, I think that part of the issue as well is understanding well, first of all, is marketing. If you adopt a build it and they will come approach to marketing the app that you've just spent a year or two developing, you're making a big mistake. You've got to be able to educate consumers on what your product does, why it's better than the competition, and what makes it so special, and you figure out ways to get it to them. That's all part of a coherent marketing plan, and that has got to be part of any developer's process. I have talked to so many developers over the years who, I've said, "What's your marketing plan for this after you've got it released?" When they will tell me about a cool beta product or a cool project that's in early development, they're like, "Well, we're going to release a few videos on YouTube, and we're hoping it'll go viral." And okay, well, that's great. Why don't you throw some pennies into the local wishing well while you're at it? You've got to have a solid marketing plan behind your products. But if it's a niche product, and you underestimate or misunderstand what the actual market for this product is, then you've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into something that just not a lot of people are going to be interested in looking at. I think that has a lot to do with one of the reasons why Unread has undersold compared to what his initial expectations were. I don't think that people care that much anymore about RSS-based products. I think that that's unfortunate, but I think it's geeky, I think it's nichey, and I just don't think that that's where people want to invest their time in figuring stuff out. But I could be totally off base there.
I think it's a good point, though. Like one of the points I agree with most strongly, and I've given talks about this to local iOS and Mac user groups, is the importance of marketing. If you're not considering it alongside development and design from the beginning of your project, then it's the same thing as not having good code or not having a good interface. It is incredibly harmful. And I don't know what Jared's marketing model is. I know he did get a lot of good coverage. But I think a couple things there that worth breaking out is that there was a gold rush when the App Store started, and there were all these, at least urban legends, and some people did make a lot of money, whether it was by selling their app or selling their app to a company that gave them a lot of money for it. There was good money to be made, but that's because it was brand new and there was a lot of opportunity there. And now if it's not at saturation, there's at least many good candidates in every category, which means it's harder to get attention and it's harder to fill needs that aren't being filled already. And I forget who linked to it, but someone also linked to an article that said that, it's when in the days of software came in boxes, people had a box to hold on to, and psychologically that created value for them. And in the iOS age, selling a digital copy, it's the same thing that Hollywood has a problem with. People don't put value in digital copies, so it trends down to a value of 0. And you've got to work really hard to convince people that the value of your software isn't 0, and that has to be because it makes them money, or saves them money, which is what enterprise software does and what professional software does, like a good timekeeper, or anything that's good. We use productivity tools. Napkin saves me tons of money because it takes me much longer to do that in Photoshop. Or you have to delight people, which is why games make money, because it's software, but it's a great experience, and great experiences can be valuable to people. But I don't know if it hurts Apple in the long run that if people can't make money, they might stop making the kind of apps that you and I grew up with on the Mac or on the early days of iOS.
That's very true, and it's a constantly evolving and changing market, and there's no question that consumer tastes have changed. I remember, one of the most I think cogent things that I think have been said about the race to the bottom, as you put it, Renee, was Merlin Mann, Hot Dog Ladies on Twitter, once said about zero price apps. It's a good thing that my Viking grill came with all these free steaks. The phone that you're buying, people don't think twice about, but they put up a fuss over spending a few dollars for an application, yet think nothing about going out and spending $4 for a Starbucks drink with some whipped cream on top of it. You've really got to. I think that fundamentally there's a problem here with user perception of value, and I'm not sure what can be done about that. I'm not sure if it's going to demand a re-education for consumers or just a recalibration of the market altogether. I know that Apple is just as concerned about the race to the bottom as many developers are. And understand that it impacts not only how developers can make money, but ultimately what the impact of the market is. If people still get continue to get the association that everything that they're downloading is going to be laden with ads or is going to demand some kind of handout in the form of in-app purchases, I think that ultimately it's going to hurt the user experience a lot on iOS, and I hope that that's not the direction that we're headed for. The fact is, some developers price their products fairly based on what their own development costs are, what they expect to recoup. They stick to their guns. A company that does that very well and has done it very well for many years now is the Omni Group. The Omni Group doesn't compromise on price. They say our product is worth $30, our product is worth $40, and they stick to it. But it requires a lot of fortitude, and it requires a business plan that I don't think a lot of developers are willing to commit to.
One of the ideas, and Armand spoke about this a couple times already, he believes that the market for paid apps, paid upfront apps, is over because people are just risk adverse. There's too many apps. Even if you wanted to sample the 10 best games or the 10 best apps in a category, you'd have to spend the very least $10 if they were all paid, and probably a lot more. And a lot of those wouldn't be to your liking. And there's really no way of sampling apps outside that. So what he did with Overcast was make it free, but it has a $5 in-app purchase that unlocks nominal new features, but is also a way of just saying, hey, thank you for this app. And I know there's been some stuff written about, upfront might be a hard time to get money from people because they don't know you very well. But if you build a relationship with them, you can pick moments when they're really into it or really having fun or really appreciate it, and then get, buy me a beer or tip me, for making this app, and that can be more effective. But that doesn't seem to me like the reliable kind of income that you need to feed a family, put food on the table, and not only continue developing that app, but plan future apps going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fix this all, Peter.
No, no. We should just blow it up and start over.
Do you think Mac apps are going to continue to hold their value? Do you think people just are traditionally used to paying more for computer apps?
No, because I've seen the same downward trend already happen in the Mac App Store. Now, the Mac App Store isn't or is newer than the iOS App Store, but the same trend happened almost right away. And right now, the Mac App Store is, and I wrote well, not an editorial about this. Yes, I did write an editorial about this, sort of complaining about it, that there's a lot of crapware flooding the Mac App Store right now. It's just these half-assed ports of iOS apps that are either ad-supported or free for download, but have some kind of in-app purchase mechanism to net the developers money, and they're just poor user experiences all the way through. It's trivially easy for somebody to build a Mac app out of their iOS app code, which is why developers are doing it. But developers, in many cases, are not taking the time to actually make a good Mac app or a good Mac app experience. That is where I hope the Mac App Store is not headed in any kind of widespread way, but I do see it happening.
ArcSign in our chat room says, while developers may not be doing their part by having a marketing plan, Apple may need to develop built-in marketing system to defend themselves in the future from Google's AdWords, web ads, which I guess is AdSense, and Amazon's affiliate link system. Now, Apple does have an affiliate system. I don't know monetarily how well it compares to Amazon's, but it is very effective. The old joke with Amazon is that you'd write a book, put it up for sale on Amazon, and then use your affiliate link, and you'd make more money off the affiliate link than you would for the book sale, because Amazon was so stingy with how much they're willing to share with publishers and authors, and how much publishers would share with authors. So I don't know how that compares, but Apple bought an ad company, and they made iAds. I forget the name of the company that they bought. I don't remember it right now. Maybe someone in the chat room remembers. But they had iAd, and I don't get any of them in Canada, Pete. I don't know if you see them in the U.S., but iAd has not been anything like the success that Google's even AdMob, I think, enjoys.
No, not at all. I think that Apple's been trying to figure out how to get iAds working pretty much from the start, ever since iAds was the thing.
Yeah, I don't think it aligns with Apple's business. Apple's business has not traditionally been the advertising model. I don't think they deeply understand it, and I actually don't think they like it. I think that they did it because they felt like they had to, but I don't think their heart was ever in it. They would much rather just sell you something, take your money, and have the end of it, of that relationship. They don't really like it when you have to constantly sort of do things like advertising or data leveraging or attention hoarding or stuff like that.
Yeah, they certainly don't. And it's so clear when Apple is working with a technology or a product that they don't really like.
All right, we're going to take another short break so I can tell you about Betterment. What if managing your investment portfolio was as easy as using your favorite iPhone app? It is now with Betterment, the most popular automated investment service with over 36,000 customers. Betterment has seamlessly integrated technology and years of investment expertise into one elegant application that will transform the way that you invest. Betterment's experience and interface are adored by tech and design enthusiasts alike, especially since sign-up is quick and doesn't involve all the red tape of other investment providers. Their platform customizes a globally diversified portfolio based on your personal goals and time horizon. Once you're invested, everything is automated, from rebalancing and tax minimization to regular deposits from your bank account. With killer technology under the hood and iPhone and Android apps to make it easy to check your progress on the go, it's hard to believe that Betterment is as low cost as it is. Investing with Betterment saves you time and money, improves your returns, and minimizes your taxes. So for a limited time, Betterment is offering iMore listeners up to 6 months of automated investment management for free. All you have to do is visit betterment.com/iMore. I'll tell you that site again. Betterment.com/iMore. Up to 6 months of automated investment management for free. I want to thank Betterment for supporting the show, and I want to thank you for supporting them. All right, so Peter, something wonderful has happened. Something I've been waiting a long time for.
What's that, Renee?
Your weekly column.
Yes, NSFW.
NSFW. I'm not going to ask you what it stands for because I have. I don't want to be damaged by the possible consequences. But you got off to a killer start.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I warned people up front when NSFW started that it may or may not be tech related every week. It's my new Saturday column, but it's just an excuse for me to rant about stuff that is on my mind. Last week it was what the hell did I write about?
Yosemite beta, being careful with it.
Yosemite beta, being careful with it. That's right. I saw all these people complaining about the Yosemite public beta, saying, this is a really bad idea to put in people's hands. And look, I work at a retail store on the weekends, an Apple retail store on the weekends. I support people who bring their machines in and all sorts of weird damage. So I understand why, if you're an IT manager or if you're an Apple genius, you're averse to seeing Apple throw out the Yosemite public beta to 1 million people, which purportedly they have done. But look, this 1 million people, it's not a general release. 1 million people, though, they're all self-selecting. They're people who actually went out and applied to download the app. So they understand consciously what they're getting into. And the bottom line is it's a public beta. My feeling is that if Mavericks had a public beta in some way that was similar to what Apple's doing with Yosemite, it probably wouldn't have been the pig that Mavericks was when it was first released. It took until 10.9.4 for Mavericks to level out to some sort of usability that didn't want me to tear out my non-existent hair. So, I'm happy that Apple's public betaing Yosemite to help avoid those problems in the future.
I am too, and we're going to look forward to another one of your columns this weekend, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, I'll have it up for you on Saturday.
Awesome. So I spent way too much time talking about iOS security over the last week, and that is because of the backdoor stories. And they were really controversial for a number of reasons, most of which didn't have anything to do with the actual security issues involved. It was things like people disagreeing about the term backdoor. Some people said that it inscribes malice of intent, and some people said it describes merely a portal of entry, the way a door to a house does. And I don't want to rehash any of that, because I think that when the story becomes a story and not the actual subject of the story, we all end up losing. So what I wanted to do instead was to help people, because I think when you empower people and inform them, it is much better than scaring them. So I put together a how to better protect your iPhone and iPad against backdoors and other security and privacy risks articles, and it covers, you can find it at imore.com/security. That's our security hub, and it does everything from telling you how to use a 4-digit passcode or Touch ID to how to have a strong alphanumeric password. It tells you how to secure your iPhone, iPad, and Mac against pairing record theft, which is the crux of this new exploit. Basically, how to remove them if you think you might have them, how to restore your device if you want to make sure it's absolutely wiped out. Also, how to secure your Mac using Apple's configurator utility so it doesn't allow your iPhone to pair with other devices anymore. And Peter wrote up File Vault 2 and firmware passwords if you want those, but also how to minimize data leaking on your lock screen, because convenience and security are always at war with each other. When you make something more convenient, it's often less secure. When you make it more secure, it's often less convenient. So for example, on an iPhone or iPad, you can access Siri and Passbook and Control Center and Notification Center and emergency calling, which is actually required by law, all through the lock screen, which is a data leak. I mean, people can turn off your Wi-Fi, turn off airplane mode. They can read the bits of your messages. They can tell Siri to do things without using your passcode. That's absolutely a security and privacy problem. But if you turn them off, then you have to access your phone. It's less convenient. No glanceable data on your lock screen. So what I wanted to do is not really tell people, how they should live their lives. But if you do want to make your iPhone more secure and more private, all the information is there. It'll be in the show notes, but just go to imore.com/security. Okay, time for a couple questions. Gagan wants to know what will be the price of Apple's iPhone 6. They haven't announced one yet. Based on prior history, Apple has, since I think the iPhone 3G, Peter, if I'm not mistaken, always put out the new iPhone at $199 for the lowest model. I think that's correct.
I believe that is, yes.
So I would think that Apple will have a $199 iPhone. It's always possible they do go up if it's a substantially more expensive device to make. It's unlikely they'll go down because that's an established price point. But to quote Peter, past is not always prologue. But Apple has been doing this for a long time, and so far they stuck with $199. So don't. It's not a guarantee by any measure, but I would not be surprised.
At least to start.
Yeah. One for you, Peter. With T-Mobile announcing nationwide voice over LTE today, do you think the iPhone 5S and possibly the iPhone 5 will get the feature activated in iOS 8, or will they hold back as a lure for people to buy new iPhone models?
No, I think it'll be my expectation is that it will be a marketing-led decision, that it'll be something that we might get in a new iPhone. But I believe, I may be wrong on this, but I do think that the iPhone 5 and up can't support voice over LTE. Isn't that right, Renee?
I don't.
Or is Ali gone?
No, Ali's gone. I don't recall offhand. Voice over LTE, for people who aren't familiar with it, is just completely packet-based. So instead of your phone calls going over a separate voice channel the way they do now, they just turn into bits. It's like voice over IP, like making a Skype call, and everything goes over data. And because there's data radios in all these devices, and LTE data radios specifically, theoretically, I imagine that it's possible, but you never know. For example, it might not be battery efficient with the way it's currently set up, or there might be limitations in the chips that Apple was using. So I think Apple tries to push down as much as they can, but Apple is also not willing to do a bad experience. Like where other companies might say, it works okay, we'll just give it to everybody. Apple won't do that because they want 30 frames per second video recording, not 15 frames. They want 30 frames per second, and they're going to want fairly rock solid VoLTE, and if they don't get it, they'll probably hold it off for the models that can do it.
Yeah, and this is part of the problem, especially when you're dealing with a carrier network like T-Mobile. I mean, it's great that T-Mobile's doing VoLTE in the areas that it can do, but for example, in the area that I live in, southeastern Massachusetts, I'm on edge all the freaking time. It drives me crazy. You know, I feel lucky when I'm actually in LTE range, and believe me, I do use it. Like I was at a Starbucks the other day that was stuck with AT&T Wi-Fi, and I actually could get, I think like three, maybe 4 bands of LTE on my phone. I've got a T-Mobile phone, and I was rocking it. I was very happy with that. But you know, T-Mobile's coverage is still squirrely. Now, T-Mobile did announce today that they're starting to get 700 megahertz out into the world. They're starting to deploy 700 megahertz. So maybe that'll help them increase their LTE footprint in a significant way in areas that are underserved like mine in the months to come. But, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other right now. As interested as I am in VoLTE, in fairness to T-Mobile, their discrete voice quality is actually really good compared to other services I've used like Verizon and AT&T. So I don't really care if the voice is packet-based or if it's a separate radio channel. You know, as long as I've got coverage, that's the important thing. And T-Mobile still has to work to improve its footprint before it does anything else.
Yeah, and that was Matt Wilkins, and it sadly reminds me of some of the dumbassery that we saw this week in media. There was an article that did some research into this idea that Apple, I forget who wrote the original dumbass article, that Apple purposely sabotages old phones to force people to upgrade to new ones. And they did some psychological testing to see what it was, and it turns out that when there's a new upgrade cycle, you know, people upgrade their phone and they're paying closer attention to it. And it's easier for them to see someone else with a newer device performing better and suddenly feel that their device is perceptibly slower, or a new operating system is more demanding, so it feels perceptibly slower. But that got reported as Apple was actually doing this nonsense again. And this is one of those areas where Apple is damned if they do, damned if they don't. And I'm sure we talked about this before, but this idea that Apple holds off features for the high end, they build new features into the high end, and they build new chipsets. Like the A7 chipset can do things that the A6 can't, so those phones don't get those features, like Touch ID and like the burst mode photography and things like that. But so here's Apple's choice. They cannot push down iOS 8 to the iPhone 4S and older devices, and then people say, Apple's deliberately withholding the software, so I have to upgrade. Or they can push it down and do the best job they can to make older, more constrained, lower speed, lower RAM, lower resource devices run it, and then people say, oh, it doesn't run as well as on the new ones. Apple's trying to make my life miserable, so I buy the new phone. And it's, you know, that if you want to have that opinion, it's very hard to empirically argue with you because we'd have to run large-scale testing with numerous devices over many years to see what the actual results are. But another way of thinking is that Apple is providing software. I know you've written about this in the past, Peter, that it might be nice for people to be able to opt out, but then they opt out of security updates too, which could leave them vulnerable, and then Apple gets smashed in the media for not securing people's iPhones. So it's a tricky problem, and I think with no good answer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we had a couple more questions. We'll just finish these off quickly to the Twitters. So, am I the only one who doesn't like the tiny left and right arrows in Safari for iPad mini? Any chance of a late change in iOS 8? Probably. I mean, you never know. Probably not. I'd have to check and see which ones you're referring to. Here's a good one for you, Peter. Is net neutrality a choice between distribution costs and targeted? All consumers fund network costs, whether high or low users. Why not target people specifically? I don't really know what that means.
Okay, so everybody, well,
I mean, Major League Baseball came out saying that they don't want these fast lanes. I think that was really interesting. Gruber linked to it, saying that it would not be good for them because they're a major streamer. Turns out, like Netflix, MLB streams a lot of video, and the idea that carriers can block them or surcharge them, they believe will end up costing them more money, and by costing them more money, will end up costing end users more money.
Yeah, I mean, don't be deceived. One way or the other, you as the consumer are going to end up shouldering the burden of increased costs, whether it's coming from the content provider or the company that you're buying the stuff, buying the access from. You know.
And the FCC wrote to Verizon today about their desire to throttle unlimited users, I believe.
Okay.
Because that's one of the things too, is that there is this theory. It's almost like, the Megalodon, Peter, that there's or Suspect Zero, that there's this uber predator out there that you can't really see, but is so good at doing what they do that they're basically unseeable. That there are these 5% of users that use untold amounts of resources, and if we could just control them, it would make it better for everybody.
The Illuminati.
Pretty much. All right, so yeah, net neutrality complex issue. Maybe we'll get Peter to tackle it again when next is in the news. What is the chance that the iPhone 6 designs that have been, and the part leaks that have been on the web lately are actually the finished product? Pretty good. I mean, people who leak these parts are getting them from the supply chain, which is when you're making hundreds or tens of millions of devices, it's really hard to keep every single one of them locked down. So I would not be surprised at all if that were to happen. Another one for you, Peter. Are we ever going to see a live updated Apple weather icon? If Apple can make the clock work, if they can make the calendar change, why can't they make the weather accurate?
Well, yeah, I guess they could. I don't know. I think it's maybe diminishing returns. You can also look outside. Just saying.
I don't know what the mechanism was. I believe it used to be like for the date, there was a limited number of assets you needed to show every day and date combination, and they could just pull the actual one. I don't know what they're doing for the clock. It might just be a set of PNGs, or that seems not useful to me. But they don't have anything in place like the live tile system on Windows Phone, and I don't know how many weather images they store. Although it does seem to me like it should be possible given those other two icons.
Or like I said, stick your head outside and see what it's doing out.
Then you bring your frozen head back inside, shiver, and say, damn, my phone didn't warn me.
There you go.
All right, Peter, that is it for us for today. If people are interested in finding you, reading more of your stuff, where can they go?
They can go to Flarg, F-L-A-R-G, on H, F-L-A-R-G-H on Twitter, and iMore. iMore.com is where I'm writing all my stuff these days.
Awesome. And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find me on iMore as well. I want to once again thank Betterment for bringing you this episode. The automated investment service built on the idea that investing intelligently should be intuitive, automated, and accessible to everyone, whether you have $10,000 or $10 million. For a limited time, listeners can get up to 6 months of free automated investment management by visiting betterment.com/iMore. That's betterment.com/iMore. The iMore Show is brought to you every week. 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. Listening live is the best way to do it because you get to ask us questions and interact with us and correct our mistakes in the chat room, and also that you are a lovely bunch of people. If you can't listen to us live, you can go to iTunes, you can go to RSS and catch up on previous episodes. Peter, once again, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Rene. I'll see you next week, man.
Absolutely. Oh, and I should say you can find Allie at iMuggle, I-M-U-G-G-L-E. That way she doesn't throw a cookie at me when she gets back.
That's right, yes.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.